The first thing I did after becoming a zombie was collecting baby formula and diapers, because I adopted a human baby girl. What I didn't expect was, this baby girl was actually the reincarnated human empress. In her past life, she fought across the land, enduring countless life and death trials, and slayed innumerable powerful alien beings. Ultimately, she perished in exhaustion fighting the queen of the star insect race. Now, she has been reincarnated 50 years earlier, at the beginning of the apocalypse. However, she returned as an infant. I had just transmigrated and was attacked by zombies. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself transformed into a bloodthirsty zombie. Yet, I retained my human consciousness. I survived daily by gnawing on frozen meat from the fridge. While searching for food as usual one day, I found a baby about 5 to 6 months old in a room. The room had many children's toys and clothes scattered around. Spoiled milk was left on the bedside table, but the bloodstains in the living room suggested the baby's parents had met a tragic end. Ji Rushui felt a pang of sorrow. She never thought that after her difficult rebirth, what awaited her was not loving parents, but a terrifying bloodthirsty zombie. In her previous life, she could destroy zombie hordes with a flick of her fingers. But now, she was a helpless infant, already starving for a long time, and overwhelmed with fear. Overwhelmed by fear and hunger, Ji Rushui fainted on the spot. I looked at this silent little one. Am I really that terrifying? Did I scare her to the ATH? I quickly reached out to check her breathing. Only after confirming she was still alive did I feel relieved. Looking at this fragile little life in the crib, a mix of emotions surged through me. Perhaps this little one was destined to survive, but she shouldn't have been born into this terrifying apocalypse. This baby must have been hungry for a long time. Seeing her too starved to even cry, a sudden wave of pity washed over me. In a way, this baby and I were kindred spirits. Both of us had inexplicably ended up in this strange world, only to face the apocalypse and the zombie crisis. So, I made up my mind to raise this baby. At least, in this broken world, I would finally have a companion. Even though I had been infected and turned into a zombie, I never thought of myself as a bloodthirsty monster. It suddenly dawned on me that the house's owners had been dead for at least 2 days. This little one hadn't eaten for a long time. I had to find some milk for her to drink. At 7 or 8 months old, she was far too small to digest any other food. She could only have formula milk. The formula can on the bedside table was already empty. I had no choice but to go out and look for more. After leaving the bedroom, I carefully closed the door behind me. I then moved the heavy sofa in the living room to block the door, firmly securing the bedroom. Next, I went to the kitchen, but there was no food left there. I figured as much. It had already been a month since the zombie outbreak. All the food must have been eaten. Perhaps the baby's parents had gone out searching for food and met their fate. Left with no choice, I decided to check the floors above. When I reached the 5th floor, I smashed the lock with a crowbar and forced open a security door. What I saw inside left me rooted to the spot. There was a female zombie in the room, her white dress soaked in dried blood. Hearing the commotion, she rushed toward the door, but seeing that I was one of her kind, she reluctantly turned away. Stepping into the room, I saw the floor covered in blood. There was also a small human skeleton, barely a meter tall. It was clear that after the zombie outbreak, the mother had turned into a zombie. Her beloved child had tragically become her meal. I stood frozen in silence, overcome with a heavy heart. I thought of the little one I had just seen. If that baby hadn't been locked in the bedroom, her fate might have been the same. Perhaps it was a small blessing amidst tragedy. Though the little one was born into this apocalyptic world, at least she encountered me, a zombie who wouldn't harm her. I then headed to the kitchen. Luckily, I found 2 unopened cans of formula milk. I also discovered 2 pieces of unspoiled raw meat. It seemed the homeowners had turned into zombies early in the apocalypse, so their food remained intact. I packed the items into my bag, glancing at the zombie still pacing by the door. After a moment of silence, I walked behind her. With a swift strike of the crowbar, I pierced her head, putting her out of her misery. Meanwhile, the fainted Ji Rushui felt something sweet and fragrant entering her mouth in her daze. The rich, milky aroma made her momentarily intoxicated. Her starving body, sensing the long-lost sweetness, instinctively began to suckle. With a bit of energy replenished, Ji Rushui finally managed to open her eyes. To her amazement, she wasn't dead at the hands of the zombie. Even more absurdly, the terrifying zombie was feeding her with a spoon. Am I dreaming, or am I so hungry that I'm hallucinating? Ji Rushui stared in disbelief at the zombie acting like a nanny. In Ji Rushui's memories of her past life, zombies were mindless creatures driven only by the thirst for blood. After the zombie crisis broke out, many of Ji Rushui's friends and companions fell victim to zombies. She had even been forced to deal with companions who lost their sanity after being bitten. So, when she first saw the zombie earlier, Ji Rushui knew her chances of survival were slim. These bloodthirsty monsters, devoid of humanity, wouldn't spare her just because she was a baby. To her surprise, not only was she not eaten, this zombie was actually feeding her. Could it be that the zombie was fattening her up to eat later? As I continued feeding the baby, I felt relieved to see her open her eyes again. After finishing the formula, I noticed the little one still staring at me with her big, bright eyes. Judging by her expression, she wasn't full. Seriously? How can such a tiny body drink so much? I instinctively said something, only to realize I couldn't speak anymore as a zombie. All I could manage were a few indistinct growls. This startled Ji Rushui. This is bad. So this guy really plans to fatten me up before killing me? Ji Rushui, who had just relaxed for a moment, became tense again upon hearing the zombie's low growls. As she braced herself for the imminent attack, she was surprised to see the zombie turn and leave. Shortly after, she heard the sound of stirring. Moments later, I returned with another bowl of formula. Ji Rushui was stunned. This was the first time she had encountered something so strange. Though she was still fearful and anxious, her body instinctively began to drink. And so, I prepared 3 consecutive bowls of formula to finally fill her up. Looking at the milk stains on her lips, I could tell from her eyes that she still wanted more. This little one eats so much. Although I've never been married or raised children, I was under the impression that such a small baby shouldn't be able to eat this much. It seems that raising this little one is going to be quite a challenge for me. Now I understand why so many of my coworkers in my previous life worked so hard just to earn enough for formula money. Raising a child is truly no easy task. Thankfully, it's the apocalypse now. I can just shop everywhere for free. At least I don't have to worry about financial burdens. From now on, when scavenging for supplies, I'll need to stock up on more formula. This little one is only going to eat more as she grows. Thankfully, formula is sealed in, can be stored for a relatively long time. After eating her fill, Ji Rushui lay comfortably in the crib, looking utterly satisfied. Her long-starved body had finally gotten some milk, and to her, it tasted like divine nectar. Ji Rushui curiously observed me. This was the first time she had witnessed something so strange. A zombie, which should have been bloodthirsty and devouring flesh, was somehow suppressing its hunger for blood. It didn't immediately pounce on me and tear me apart. That alone is surprising, but it knows how to prepare formula, and even feed me with a spoon? This is way too absurd. In her past life, Ji Rushui had personally witnessed the entire apocalypse unfold. She survived countless challenges and dangers, enduring life and ATH trials to finally achieve Empress status. As a peerless Empress, she had seen all kinds of zombies. In fact, the number of zombies she killed was beyond counting, although zombies would evolve over time, eventually developing intelligence after evolution. That kind of evolution didn't happen at this stage. At least the zombie before her exuded a very weak aura. It was clearly just a newly turned, low-level Tier 1 zombie. These kinds of zombies were everywhere. They're the kind turned by the zombie virus infection. At this level, zombies are absolutely incapable of developing intelligence. They're nothing more than bloodthirsty beasts driven by instinct. Ji Rushui looked at the zombie in front of her, utterly unable to make sense of the situation. As a peerless empress, Ji Rushui had faced countless life and ATH crises. Even now, facing a zombie, she remained calm. For some unknown reason, this zombie had no intention of attacking her, at least for now. So there was no need to worry excessively. Even if the zombie did attack her, she'd already had a full meal before dying. At least she'd be satisfied. Not starving to ATH in a crib was a small comfort to her empress pride. As these thoughts passed through her mind, Ji Rushui felt a wave of drowsiness. Days of hunger and fear had left her nerves strained to their limit. Now, with her stomach full, her tense nerves finally relaxed. Ji Rushui's eyelids grew heavy, and she couldn't resist falling into a deep sleep. I looked at the adorable baby, knowing I had just fed her myself. I had saved her young life. A sense of accomplishment welled up within me. Seeing her quietly lying in the crib, her face serene and peaceful, filled me with a warm sense of joy. From now on, in this zombie-overrun city, I would no longer be alone. Little one, you and I share the same fate. We both arrived in this strange world only to face the zombie crisis. Don't worry, I will take care of you. Ji Rushui slept deeply and sweetly. She didn't know why, even with a bloodthirsty zombie standing beside her. Yet, she slept very peacefully. She didn't even know how long she had been asleep. She only felt as if she were floating in mid-air. Turned out the zombie had picked her up. The series of actions by the zombie left Ji Rushui increasingly baffled. But now, she was more concerned about where the zombie intended to take her. Holding the baby in my arms, I left the room. The place where I had fainted after the zombie outbreak was an old residential complex. The buildings here were 7 stories tall with no elevators. So, I decided to move up to the 7th floor. The night before, I had already cleared out all the remaining zombies in the stairwell. After reaching the 7th floor, I carefully placed Ji Rushui into the bedroom I had prepared earlier. This was the top floor, which greatly reduced the spread of scents and sounds. At least for now, it seemed like a safe place to stay. In front of this baby, I felt an instinctive desire to reclaim my former humanity. So, I planned to make this room our home from now on. I also decided to gradually return to human-like living. The room, initially covered in dust, had been thoroughly cleaned by me beforehand. Most importantly, in this room, I found many baby clothes, diapers, bottles, children's toys, and books. Most likely, the previous owners of this room also had a child. They probably fled in a hurry after the zombie outbreak began. Standing by the window, gazing at the desolation outside, I stretched lazily. Perhaps it was because of this baby. But even as I looked at the ruined world outside, I felt a new sense of motivation and hope. I then took out a diaper, preparing to change Ji Rushui. Dry, absorbent, and comfortable. Disposable diapers truly are one of humanity's greatest inventions. At that moment, Ji Rushui felt a chill run down her spine. Being fed by a zombie was one thing, but it could also change diapers? Feeding might be explained by instinct. But baby diapers were a human invention. Changing one isn't something done by instinct alone. At that moment, in Ji Rushui's mind, a startling thought occurred to her. Could this zombie retain human consciousness? She recalled her first encounter with this zombie. Other zombies would either crazily ram doors, or claw at them with their fingers. But this zombie had turned the doorknob first. In other words, it knew how to open doors. And since the bedroom was locked, it used a crowbar to pry the lock open. Earlier, Ji Rushui had been too hungry and scared to notice this detail, but now, recalling it, she realized something was off. When did zombies learn to use crowbars? And not only did this zombie not devour her immediately, it made formula in a bowl to feed her. That completely defied logic. And now, it even changed her diaper? Could anything more absurd happen? At that moment, Ji Rushui was extremely excited, as if she had discovered a new world. But wait, hold on. Looking at the zombie in front of her, it didn't seem to be female. The Empress herself had just been diaper changed by a man? Ji Rushui's eyes widened, and she finally realized her body had been completely exposed earlier. Her emotions grew intensely agitated. In her past life, she had never even touched a man's hand. Even during the apocalypse, Ji Rushui had never had any intimate contact with the opposite sex. But now, unexpectedly, her lifetime of purity was ruined by a diaper. Ji Rushui felt an urge to cry but had no tears. She never imagined that her rebirth would be filled with such absurdities. Could this zombie actually think of her as his daughter? The thought made Ji Rushui's heart tremble. Her mind involuntarily pieced together a tragic story. Perhaps this zombie before her once had a beloved daughter before the apocalypse. But in the apocalypse, human life became worthless. Faced with waves of bloodthirsty zombies, only 1 in 10 humans survived. Especially in the early stages of the outbreak, ordinary city dwellers had virtually no chance of survival. Most likely, this zombie's daughter died shortly after the apocalypse began. And yet, in his mind, he still clung to memories of her. That love, transcending life and death, made this bloodthirsty zombie see her as his daughter. Which is why, upon seeing her, he showed a gentleness unlike any other zombie. Everything this zombie did for her was likely what he used to do for his own daughter. Even though he had turned into a zombie, he still couldn't let go of his love for his daughter. Ji Rushui felt both moved and pity for him. Imagine a person who once had a happy family, suddenly facing the end of the world. Everything familiar around him had changed beyond recognition. Even he had become a bloodthirsty zombie, losing the family he cherished most. The most tragic part was that after losing everything, this zombie still retained his human consciousness. He was essentially dead. Yet he had to continue living in pain. He continued to exist in this broken world, a city in ruins, devoid of any semblance of life. He wandered among the hordes of zombies, without a single companion who could truly connect with him. Because he retained human consciousness, he couldn't live the mindless, bloodthirsty life that other zombies lived each day. Yet, because he had become a zombie, he could no longer integrate with humanity. He could only watch as the people he once knew turned their weapons on him, their eyes filled with hatred and disgust. Whether it was zombies or humans, there was no place for him anymore. It was as if he existed outside of this world, the loneliest being of all. The world was vast and desolate, yet he couldn't find a single companion. This solitary journey through life was worse than death. Ji Rushui looked at the zombie in front of her, and sighed inwardly. Before she became the Empress, she had been a kind-hearted and innocent young girl. She still had a soft spot in her heart. Since you see me as your daughter, then I declare, from now on, you shall be my zombie father. With the room tidied up, it was time to think about food storage. Previously, I had been eating frozen raw meat from stores. But that wouldn't work anymore. The little one is still so small. And there's a lot to consider. The formula I brought back temporarily won't last for her. If she can drink 3 big bowls of milk at this age. Her appetite is extraordinary, not to mention, once she weans off milk, she'll need to eat other foods. So I plan to store more food in our little nest. Looking outside, it was still daytime. I decided to lie down on the sofa. After all, I am now a zombie. Although the zombies on the streets ignored me, what worried me more were the survivors hiding in the shadows. If I went out to gather supplies during the day, and a hidden survivor spotted me, it might arouse suspicion. If it only drew attention, that'd be fine. But I feared it could expose my hideout and the little one. In the post-apocalyptic world, humans were not much safer than zombies. Soon, the sun set, and the entire city was plunged into darkness. Before leaving, I barricaded the stairwell on the 7th floor. Besides, I had already cleared out all the zombies in the building. Zombies from outside generally wouldn't bother climbing stairs. The little one is still young, so she wouldn't make much noise in the room. But I did this not only to guard against zombies, but also to defend against humans. After turning into a zombie, I had been living in a store for the past month. Through the windows, I witnessed many post-apocalyptic horrors. At first, when the apocalypse broke out, most people managed to remain calm and kind-hearted. But as death became more common, and food grew scarce, the darker side of human nature began to surface. The kindest and most helpful people were often the first to fall victim to the zombies. I still remember that within days of the outbreak, the streets were filled with the cries of women. You didn't need to imagine what was happening. After 2 weeks, the city lost water and electricity, and some began trading their bodies just for a bite to eat. As for pushing their companions towards zombies, to secure their own escape, that became an everyday occurrence. I even saw with my own eyes someone who, due to a lack of food, some survivor groups, driven mad by hunger, didn't dare face the bloodthirsty zombies, but turned their knives on their own companions. Even though I had become a zombie, I still restrained my bloodlust and didn't harm humans. Yet some people, still alive, had already started killing and eating their companions. These people had completely lost their humanity, not even deserving to be called human. They didn't even spare children. If the little one were discovered by them, the consequences would be unimaginable. For a bite to eat, they would do anything. Not long after, I packed large amounts of food into a backpack, and carried the rest in my arms. If a survivor with night vision had seen this, they would have witnessed a bizarre sight. On the pitch-black, silent streets, bloodthirsty zombie was sneaking around, carrying a large pile of formula. Meanwhile, Ji Rushui, having woken up, found the room empty. Where did zombie dad go in the middle of the night? I need to pee. Never mind. I have a diaper anyway. What a great invention. But just then, through the slightly open window, Ji Rushui noticed the blood-red moon in the sky. It looked incredibly eerie. The blood moon? Is tonight already the night of the blood moon? It seems the era of global evolution is about to begin. Looking at the blood moon above, I felt a bit lost. In a quiet corner, I opened a can of formula. It was still white inside. I breathed a sigh of relief. For a moment, I thought I had pink eye. My eyes were fine, which meant the moon had really turned blood red. Ignoring the changes in the sky, I spent the entire night moving supplies. Formula, bottles, diapers, essentials for the baby, as well as various snacks and toys. I even grabbed children's books. Though it was the end of the world, I still planned to teach the little one how to read and speak. Ji Rushui looked at the 5 years of college entrance exams and 3 years of mock tests I brought back, and suddenly felt a tingling sensation on her scalp. If she remembered correctly, she wasn't even 1 year old yet. Starting exam prep now seemed a bit too hasty. Besides, it was already the apocalypse. What entrance exam? Not long after, this roughly 100 square meter apartment was packed to the brim with supplies. Just then, I suddenly felt an abnormal heat inside my body. I had to remember I was a zombie. My blood had stopped flowing long ago, turning into a disgusting, dark brown color. But then, I sensed an unbearable itching in my brain, as if my brain itself was about to explode. All I could do was crouch in a corner, clutching my head, my body trembling uncontrollably, wondering if my human consciousness trial period had expired, and I was about to turn into one of those bloodthirsty zombies. I had only just resolved to keep living, just found new hope and a new goal, just found someone to live alongside me. In this broken apocalypse, I couldn't bear losing myself just like that. I had no clue what was happening to my body, or what I might become, but I had to stay conscious. Black veins on my body began to lighten and shift toward a bluish hue. Meanwhile, the horrifying wound on my shoulder, which had been dry and weathered for a month, looking utterly revolting, now, shockingly, began to heal at a slow pace. Although it hadn't fully recovered, it no longer appeared so disturbingly gruesome. My nails started to change. And the sharp, uneven teeth grew more orderly. At the same time, in the silent darkness of the night, sudden howls from numerous zombies rang out. Many zombies under the moonlight were experiencing the same changes I was. Their bodies began to tremble. And even some survivors caught in the moonlight, their bodies began to heat up, undergoing subtle changes under the moonlight. In the bedroom, Ji Rushui was also enveloped by the blood-red moonlight streaming in from outside. Her petite body started trembling slightly. Ji Rushui felt an intense heat coursing through her body. She didn't know how much time had passed. When I woke up again, I found myself lying on the street. I moved slightly, and discovered my body had become more agile. My strength had increased significantly as well. I looked at the zombies around me, and noticed that they, too, had undergone significant changes. The grotesque and horrifying zombies now appeared slightly more human-like after this one night. Although after the blood moon, the monotonous routine of life seemed to have shifted slightly. After being inexplicably transported to this strange world, I had been living a dazed and muddled existence. Now, at last, there were some changes. Living the same repetitive life every day was suffocating. As I prepared to gather my supplies and head home, I passed by a zombie, and suddenly felt a strange sensation rise within me. It was as if there was a faint connection between us. No way, I thought to myself. That couldn't possibly be it. But soon I realized this unique connection wasn't due to any odd feelings toward the zombie. Rather, it felt like there were invisible threads forming in my mind, linking me to this zombie. These zombies, in my presence, seemed like hollow dolls devoid of self-awareness, and I appeared to possess a unique ability to infuse my thoughts into them through these invisible threads. It was like controlling a puppet with strings. I quickly began testing my hypothesis. As I focused my attention, I could vaguely feel a growing connection with the zombie in front of me. After a short while, the zombie that had been limping and swaying moments before suddenly stood still, forward, raised its hand. On the desolate street, the zombie began doing chest expansion exercises. I named this peculiar ability corpse control. It seemed I had the demeanor of a ruler. I continued to manipulate the zombie, making it dance, play basketball, and even rap. The only pity was that the zombie still couldn't talk. For now, I could only control 2 zombies at the same time. And if they were too far away, it was hard to issue precise commands. Suddenly, I remembered the little one was still at home, so I quickly instructed Zombie 1 and Zombie 2 to carry the supplies I had collected, and hastily headed back to the Mingyue neighborhood. Meanwhile, in the 7th floor bedroom, Ji Rushui was gradually waking up from her deep sleep. Having been bathed in the blood-red moonlight all night, she had awakened a supernatural power, telekinesis. With her mind, she could manipulate objects, flying through the air, retrieving items from afar, and more. It was a power that defied all logic. What delighted Ji Rushui most, however, was that she had not only awakened telekinesis, but also regained her extraordinary ability from her previous life, time manipulation. Through various experiments and extensive observations over time, in her previous life, it had been theorized that the awakening of extraordinary powers might be closely tied to one's soul. Different souls would possess different powers. Ji Rushui was ecstatic. This time, she was even stronger than in her previous life. After all, upon her rebirth, she had gained an additional power, telekinesis. She could now be considered a dual-talent awakener. In her previous life, with only time manipulation, she had already thrived in the apocalypse. As she grew stronger over time, the terrifying power of time manipulation granted Ji Rushui the ability to control entire battlefields. She could bring battles to a complete halt, and even accelerate or decelerate the flow of time around herself and her enemies. This talent was nothing short of miraculous. It was with this extraordinary power that Ji Rushui ultimately rose to the position of Empress. In this lifetime, not only did she still possess time manipulation, but she also had telekinesis. Just then, Ji Rushui heard some noise outside the room. Was her zombie dad back? Lying in bed at that moment, her heart was filled with curiosity. She wondered if a low-level zombie with human consciousness could successfully evolve after undergoing the baptism of the blood moon. Will it be like humans? Successfully awakened extraordinary abilities?